والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وصحابته أجمعين. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. سبحانك لا فهم لنا إلا ما فهمتنا إنك أنت الجواد الكريم. وقل رب زدني علما. So continuing with our suluk, character building, developing generosity and abstaining and distinguishing the ill effects of greed and avarice. So we talked about that in some detail previously. Here we want to talk about what is greed and avarice. What is its definition? Does it have, according to Sharia, is there some perimeters which we would call this greed and this wouldn't be greed? So what is the definition? So some say that greed would be, or not to be greedy. In other words, what would qualify a person not to fall into the category of the greedy? That's the main thing. We don't want to be greedy, we want to be generous. But what would be what we call bakhil or bukhl? And the person who has bukhl and greed, he's called bakhil. So some say that the person who would pay the zakat and he would pay whatever compulsory expenditure on his family, then that's all he has to do. If he does that, then he's out of the perimeters of bukhl, of greed. If he's taking care of that, then he's not greedy. Of course, let's suppose that if someone was, there was a court order, there was a dispute, and the judge said, okay, you have to pay your wife and your children this amount, and so he pays that amount, and he said, I won't give you an extra $1. So probably nobody would consider that fellow very generous, and we would probably consider it still seems that he's a bit greedy. So therefore, the ulama say it's not simply that he's paying his zakat. Of course, that is the minimum, the bare minimum. Just like in zakat, the amount that is to be paid in zakat is the bare minimum. Less than that is going to be a sin, right? But of course, the people who want to have higher positions, they will spend more in charity, in various forms of charity. So similarly, if a person is paying his zakat and he's paying the bare minimum expenditure to his wife and children, if he has parents that also require his assistance, then he's paying that. But he doesn't go beyond that. So people, we have a concept which is known as urf, common understanding. So generally people would not consider that really very, what we call muru'ah, or this is not the character, a praiseworthy character that people should be endowed with. So, in other words, paying zakat and giving what is absolutely necessary and being generous above and beyond that and in a reasonable fashion, what people would consider reasonable. Okay? So if we're doing that, then inshallah we will have come out of the perimeters of being bakhil or being greedy, or greed and avarice. But that doesn't make us a generous person, a jawad. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Jawad. He is the Jawad. He spends on the entirety of the cosmos and creation day and night, right? Those who believe in, those who totally deny Him, those who are at war with Him, still Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spends and gives, unlimitedly, to everyone. So, in doing so, we have this concept which is known as muru'ah, which is, chivalry and being a person, a human being taking on praiseworthy human characteristics. So if a person is spending in such a way that people of that category, or people who are respectable and honorable people, would consider that yes, this person has not engaged in avarice, in greed, in holding back where it shouldn't be done. And he's spending on things that should be done. Of course, this doesn't mean that he's spending lavishly and going into the head of israf. He's not wasting. He's not throwing, wealth and properly away without purpose. But he's generous in helping wherever he can help, and on all of those types of areas where if he doesn't spend, people would consider he's greedy. Is that clear? So it's kind of like, and of course this would be different for different people, it would be different for different places, different circumstances. A person who has billions, then he would, if he's holding back millions, he would be called greedy. A person who has, there was a woman who came with her, with her two daughters, and she was a beggar. She had nothing. She had nothing to eat. Neither she nor her daughters. She came to Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha. So Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha had one date. It's pretty hard for us to imagine that. You know, we have to sort out the things that are spoiling in our fridge. We talked about that previously, right? You know, and the things that are going bad, which we're going to be held accountable for also. We're going to be asked about all of these ni'mats that Allah has given us, you know, and we're just squandering it away. So they were not having all this wherewithal. They were lucky to find something to eat, anything. So Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, the wife of the greatest of creation, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, she has in her possession at that particular time one date. She gives that date. So it's as though she's giving everything that she has. Now, interestingly, she gave the date to that woman. So what does the woman do? She breaks the date into two. And she gives one half to the one child, and she gives the other half to the other child. And she goes hungry. So also, the woman showed that they were jawad with one date. So, according to the situation, according to the person, their wherewithal, the times and the circumstances, you know. For example, for us to give in charity $1, you know, is considered something very small. Now that $1, for example, in Pakistan is what? Is about 200 rupees? Huh? So 200 rupees in Pakistan is quite a pretty good deal. It used to be anyway. It's depleting every day. But still, 200 rupees, it sounds like much more than $1. So, you know, depending on the place, depending on the time, the circumstance, the person himself, the wherewithal that they have, you know. And so therefore, when we also mentioned that we have these billionaires who have, you know, they have given half of their wealth in charity, which is not to be discounted. You know, somebody has 60 billion and he gives 30 billion in charity. That's not a small thing. That's a great thing. But he's still got 30 billion. So, our aslaf, however, that's not the concept that they would keep. They would consider, and this is, you know, the basis, and we're going to see this in the end of the chapter. The basis is that we don't consider what we have as ours, actually. We are custodians. Even the body that we have, it's not ours, by the way. You know, people, they say, no, it's my body, I do with it what I want. It's my house, it's my car, it's my this. It isn't. It all belongs to Allah. Did you create your own body? No. Are you sustaining your own body? Are you controlling your own? It belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is amana. It is a trust in our hands. And we're going to be questioned about how we used it. Not only in terms of action, but did we take care of it as well? So, our aslaf used to understand that everything belonged to Allah. Lillahi ma fis samawati wa ma fil ard. To Allah belongs everything in the heavens and the earth and everything in between. So, whatever resources we have, it actually belongs to Allah, and we are custodians. And so therefore, if they had billions, and they were, according to, you know, if we would have reverse economics, if you will, you know, you would compare Sayyidina Abdurrahman bin Auf with Jeff Bezos, for example. I mean, he had fortunes. And those fortunes used to come to him, and he would spend the entirety. He would keep something moderately sufficient for his own well-being, and the rest of it was all spent in the path of Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would give him another, you know, tharwa, they say, another huge amount, and he would continually spend in the path of Allah. So they would keep what was necessary for them to live moderately, and the rest they considered as resources to be used in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for various and diverse purposes. So they were Jawad, and they would take on the characteristics, as Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, take on the characteristics of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as is humanly possible. Allah is the source of all generosity, so we should also be generous. So at least one would be, aloof from being stingy and greedy to the extent that he's not spending where people generally would consider that's what people should be spending upon, right? Going above and beyond that, then we go into actual generosity. So what is the Jawad, or the generous person? So again, a definition, some say that he is huwa alladhi yu'ti bila man. Generous person is the one who gives and he never says, hey, look, I gave you that? You don't remember? He gives and he forgets. As the one hadith says, his right hand spends in such a way, secretly and quietly, so that his left hand is not aware of what's going on. لا تعلم شماله ما تنفق يمينه. Allah make us like that. Another definition of the generous person is the one who is, when he gives, he's excited about it. He's very happy. When the taxman comes, every year when the IRS comes around, are we happy to? Not usually. This is one of the things that also, impressed me on my journey to Islam. I saw these people, in Ramadan, at the end of Ramadan, people usually spend their zakat. Traditionally, you don't have to, but generally people do because they want to get the extra benefit of Ramadan. So I used to see these people with stacks of money. They were just giving it away, and they were just smiling and having it in Ethiopia. So what's that, here it's like when the taxman comes, the people don't smile when they pay off IRS and they write those checks. But here, they were just feeling, like, wow, he's just having a great time spending his money. So, because they realized that this is money which I'm really investing in the best possible investment, right? Forever and ever and ever I'll be reaping the benefits. Legal interest, you guaranteed return. Otherwise, guaranteed return here is interest. You're not allowed. With Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you have guaranteed interest, guaranteed returns. Jaiz, it's absolutely jaiz. So, that's another sign of a person being a jawad, a generous person. He yafrahu bil i'ta. He's excited. He loves to give. Okay, so now, if we happen to have this quality, and probably most of us do have to some extent, this quality of avarice, greed, we're taught from the system is like that. Our education is like that. Get. The whole education system is to get, right? Materially. It's not to develop us so that we become acceptable to our Creator and return to our Creator in the best possible way, which is what education is supposed to be based upon. But since we live in a material environment where material is holy and sanctified, and so the more of it you have, the greater you are. So it produces in us greed and avarice because we're trained to be like that. So how do we get over this? How do we get out of it? So it says that the reason for greed and avarice is because of two things. And those two things all go back to one basic thing, and that is the love of wealth. Why is somebody greedy? Because he loves it. He wants wealth. And there's two reasons why people love wealth. One is, and that's common rank and file of people, they love wealth because they love what it gets them. Because generally if we haven't trained our nafs to come under our control, or come under the control of Sharia, rather, so our nafs wants and wants and wants and wants. And we want to fulfill the wants of our nafs. And how do we fulfill the wants of our nafs? With money. So, loving of the money is not actually loving of the money, but it's loving the desires and pleasures that we can achieve with the money. But then, we have another type of people who just love the money. Just to have the gold and the silver and the dollars and the rupees and the stock bonds and whatever. They just love to see that. Despite the fact that they're not even spending on themselves, much less their families or anyone else. Not only that, But when they die, it will go to others. It might even go generally to their enemies. And nothing that they save behind is going to go with them. In spite of that, subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save us. Allahu Akbar. Even you find people, they don't even have children. They don't even have anyone that's actually going to inherit it. It's going to go back to the state or something. But the love of money. La ilaha illallah. So the author here says, he says, this is a person that their treatment is nigh impossible. I mean, they are really a bad case. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save us from anything like that. So he gives an example. He says it's like a person, that he loves somebody. He has a great love for so-and-so. So somebody sends his messenger to give him a message about whatever. So then he falls in love with the messenger and he forgets about the one who sent him, right? So the dunya is a messenger of our needs, if you will. It's a kind of an analogy of that. So the dunya is here, mata'un. Ad-dunya mata'. It's something to be used, it's something to use as a facilitation. We use it for our needs, and those needs should facilitate our life of servitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To that extent, our needs should be fulfilled. So, if we keep that perspective, then whatever resources we have are to fulfill our needs, which facilitate us to live a life of service. It's fine. And we would not be considered greedy if we are collecting that much amount and spending upon ourselves for that purpose. But because of the fact that we forget that, and we forget that we have not been able to prioritize and distinguish our needs from our desires. Allahu Akbar. And now we are living lives in this 21st century where just about everything that we think is a need, it's really desires. Our phones, these smartphones, this phone is very smart, but we are not very smart in the way that we use it. 30 years ago, nobody had one. Think about that. We just had a class about talking about digital addiction. And so this is a classic example. 30 years ago, nobody had. 40 years ago, nobody had a mobile, nobody even heard of it. The President of the United States didn't have a mobile phone, by the way. Was he running the country? Debatable, I suppose, but as good as they're doing now, if not better, right? But now, because of conditioning, circumstance and conditioning, now, when you leave your house and you reach in your pocket and you found that your phone is not in your pocket, how do you feel? How's your blood pressure? Huh?
Honestly, sometimes you forget your phone, you actually realize it's a nice break from life.
So is that good?
Yeah, it actually feels good. Even though you may miss...
Well, you're lucky.
You may miss on something, but...
Generally, it's like... So the point is, we had this so we talked about the refrigerator last time. Refrigerator is a necessity. We have to have a refrigerator, right? Why? Before, people used to actually buy things fresh. Those who came from Pakistan and Arab countries and other places, you might have seen that, or at least your parents would have seen it. Or at least we've seen it. We even, in our childhood, we even saw it here. So you would buy something fresh from the market, which probably came a day or two, or maybe that morning it came from the field. You would cook it, you would eat it, you would buy the amount that you needed. And if there was extra, you would give it to your neighbors or poor or whatever, because there's no place to store it. Now we have a fridge. We have a freezer. We can freeze these things and we can be eating these things, 10 years down the road. So this has caused us, so these are actually not necessities. As a matter of fact, they have actually changed the dynamics of society. Not in a positive way, really, if we analyze it. So, going back to, so if we realize, again, that, this wealth Number one, it's a test and a trial. إِنَّمَا أَمْوَالُكُمْ وَأَوْلَادُكُمْ fitna. It's a test. Your wealth, children, all of these are tests. And if we really start thinking about what are necessities, there's the minimalist movement going on now. People are starting to realize we don't need all this stuff. We gotta, we can live much more comfortable lives. And when you have all this stuff, you have to pay for it. And paying for it means you have to work for it. So we're not one job, two jobs, investments, and wife works and kids work, and everybody's working so that one day we'll enjoy. When will that day be? Well, if we work for our hereafter, which may not require any of those resources, we can enjoy for eternity and have a life of itminan. Man amala salihan min dhakarin wa untha wa huwa mu'min فَلَنُحْيِيَنَّهُ حَيَاةً طَيِّبَةً. Person has iman and amala salihan, right? He'll have a beautiful life here, and that's what you want, satisfaction. All of these things, at the end of the day, they want to be satisfied. أَلَا بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَطْمَئِنُّ الْقُلُوبُ. It's only the dhikr of Allah that will bring satisfaction to the heart. None of these things bring satisfaction. Believe me. Yeah. Okay. So now, how do we get this greed out of our hearts? So if we understand what wealth, the reality of wealth, right? Then, as they say, every type of disease, the treatment of any disease is to go against its cause. Bring about a strategy which is against its cause, right? So the cause of our greed is the love of wealth. So we need to understand what is the reality of wealth. We need to ponder over the afad. Nabi alayhi sallam here in Riyadh al-Salihin we've mentioned, and many more ahadith are going to come. The Quran is replete, Sunnah is replete with exposition of the dunya for what it is, right? So we need to ponder over those ayats of the Quran. We need to ponder over those hadith. The reality of the world, the dunya, like the water coming down from the sky, the vegetation, rich, lush, green, and after a few moments it turns into yellow, crumbling nothingness scattered in the wind. And we've made our life subjective to acquire dust that scatters in the wind. So we need to ponder over the reality of the world, the worldly things, and reduce our connection to it. Right? Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. One of the main reasons, and we all, all of us who are fathers and grandfathers, some of us are now great-grandfathers and great-grandmothers, right? So what we say, but we need to leave something for the children, right? This is a big trick of Satan as well. If we have the wherewithal, we leave to them, okay, fine. But I tell you really, generally speaking, what happens when the children inherit from the parents? The father came from Pakistan. He worked hard for 20 years. He built up a little business. It got bigger. It became flourishing. And the children inherit that business. What do they do with it? Generally squander it. They ruin it. They didn't sacrifice for it. They don't even understand, what it entails. So we struggle. We say, and the premise is we're doing it for our children. Did we teach them character? Did we teach them to love Allah and His Rasul? Did we teach them to prepare for death, which is the ultimate of the life? To prepare themselves for the everlasting world where they could live in paradise forever. Do we? No, we need to leave them a house. We need to leave them a bankroll, which probably they'll squander. And if we haven't prepared them to live a life of Sharia and live a life of ta'alluq with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a life of ubudiyah, of servitude, what we have gathered and spent our lives gathering and handed over to them, they turn around and spend it in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's disobedience. Then where will we be? Where will they be and where will we be as a result? We facilitated them to further disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's not the solution. The solution is, as Umar ibn Abdul Aziz rahmatullah alayhi, when he passed away and he was the Khalifa, and he had 13 sons, he didn't leave anything for them. It was all like Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he left nothing. People said, you've left 13 sons, you didn't leave anything for them? He said, I left them with taqwa. If they're muttaqis, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala yatawalla al-muttaqin. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is wali al-muttaqin. And if they're not, then what is my ta'alluq with them? I did my best. I tried my best to put them on that. And of course, they all did immensely well because they were prepared to be connected with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala indeed. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq to realize, that this world, what it is, the reality of what it is, and what the next world, what is its reality, and set our priorities straight and work for them for the rest of our lives. Ameen. Thumma ameen. Wa akhir da'wana. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.